anyone who has put a lot of this information together on the Eastern Shore. So this is so exciting to be able to think that we are starting to look seriously at the foundations of all of the communities on the Eastern Shore, both white and African American, besides the single tax colony. There were many here before that. I am just interested in local history. I'm just more interested in other people's background than mine, I think. But the real stars tonight are our panelists. And I do have a specific thing. We have one that hasn't been able to make it. I don't know if she'll get here or not. The one that's going to tell us a little bit more about downtown Daphne. But believe me, they know enough about downtown Daphne. We'll put some of you up here too. We do want to encourage you to, if you have something to add, we'll give some time for that too, because I'd love to be able to get resources for more information. And I've already found one tonight that we're so excited about. First, I'm just going to ask you to pass this down and just tell us your name and what you were, I'll tell you, and how I met you. But just tell us, like, where you were born, if you've worked here through the years, if you went away and came back, and maybe where you went to school, a little bit about that, just so we know a little bit about you today. This is Arnetta Valerie. Pay attention to that. Sims.
I'm Arnetta Valerie Sims. My grandmother was I grew up in a very culture, and with being Catholic from that culture. And I went to school in Mobile, privatized education all the way. And I did extensive research on the Valerie family, because I really don't know much about the paternal side, nor my mother's father's side. But for the Valerie side, I've always had an interest. So tonight, I hope I can do you due justice by taking you on my journey from the plantation to Mount Trucks.
And this is Miss Ella Mae Fuller.
Yes, and hello everyone. How are you? I was born in Fairhope and educated through Shrine of the Cross from K through 8. And then I had to go to Fairhope to Eugene. And what a worst year. Ooh! If you know anything about the Catholics in the old days, you had, to wear your PE uniform. It was a dress with lumens, and you couldn't see that. And then I go to Eugene, and Miss Baldwin wanted me to wear shorts, and I'm like, all over the place. I couldn't take it. But anyway, I went to Alabama State, transferred to Cal State LA, and there I received my bachelor's and my master's in special early ed. So I have been in LA County Schools 34 years of my life. But that's not why I'm here. Okay, so I'm going to pass it, and then I'm going to talk about she's kin to me too. And the other one over here is Miss she's kin to me too.
That's right.
So I had to leave Dodge to find a husband, because between the two grandmothers, the first thing they would ask the boy, what's your mama name? Don't come back here no more. So we had to leave to find that. But my task today is to talk about Wilson Day. That's on my mother's side. The Valeries is on Daddy's side, but I'm going to deal with the Wilsons.
And you're going to learn so much. Mr. Glennon, Bob Glennon, graciously agreed. The real expert and descendant on the topic that he's going to help us do a little bit about is Thelma Young Todd. And she was not able to be with us tonight, I don't think. Thelma. She didn't think she'd be back from out of town at this time. So Bob is graciously, and he will have a little bit of news for us when it's his turn. So Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. You know, I used to call square dancing, and I was always told to never follow a banjo player. And I think I'm following a banjo player. We'll see what happens. My background is electronics. I've got a legal training, but I've been in the electronics industry. But basically, some of you know the Glennon's on the Grand Hotel. I've written a book about Cujo Lewis, the last slave voyage to America. I'm for 9 years, the editor of the Museum Friends newsletter. So I've kind of been dismissed from some very prestigious places to people trying to get me out of the room. But we've I've been blessed to enjoy a lot of Fairhope history. My purpose of being here is to talk about Fairhope history and a few specific segments that I'll get involved in. But I'm just kind of here because I talked to Harriet and she said, be here.
That's right. And Miss Catherine King is Miss Fairhope history as well. And you're part of the Fair. She's done just excellent research with the single tax colony. Catherine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Harriet. I didn't expect to be here this evening. I expected to be out there this evening. But I am Catherine King. I've lived here 53 years. I'm from Gaines Quarry, Alabama, which tells you a little bit that our great state of Alabama has many other interesting places too. That's where the marble is, the most beautiful marble in the world, in Gaines Quarry. But I'm delighted to be here tonight. I'm lucky enough to be taking Miss Harriet Outlaw's course. That we have our last class this coming Monday, and it is on the communities, the old communities of Baldwin County. I have learned so much. I've also had the pleasure, and I see several of my classmates in here, I've also had the pleasure of hearing Miss Arnetta. Y'all are going to be wow, and I know Miss Willie too, but oh my goodness, y'all. But I'm happy to be here, and you know, we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us, and it's our responsibility to preserve and learn about those who came before. So I'm delighted to be here, and if I can help in any way, I'm glad to.
Thank you so much for coming at the last minute. The earliest, I'm going to give just a tiny bit of an overview, no more than 5 minutes, because they're the most important part. But there were early plantations under foreign rule. And actually, we're going to come back to this near the end of our program. But before we were part of the United States, Spanish, French, British, there were the Doleves, of course, the French that had the land grant around Daphne, which is now where Village Point is, and their cemetery is there. And their graves don't look quite that bad now. That's an old picture of the graves, but that's Louis Doleve. You might want to take a good look at him. Then, south of Stockton, the British general in Mobile, when he retired the governorship there, he built a plantation at Farm Hill, just south of Stockton. And there is a historic marker there today if you want to go up that road. You are aware, I hope, that in 1819, Alabama became a state. So our focus now is a little bit more on the statehood, because we're looking more at those years, even though some of these people had ancestors here long before then. The different reasons that African Americans came to Baldwin County, and I certainly have a project for our research staff here at the library. I'm really having difficulty finding census with numbers of blacks in Baldwin County in 1850. But of course, many were here because of slavery. But many freedmen came here too before the Civil War. And that could be a fascinating book. You know, I've read a little bit about it, but number one, we were so rural. There wasn't a lot of law enforcement. It was an agricultural economy, but it was not dependent on slave labor except in the large plantations. And along the shore especially, it was a hired labor situation. There was the forest industries, of course, and the other industries that gave them work here. Now, in 1850, the Alabama U.S. Census does list 345,000 African Americans. 342,000 of them were slaves, and the free blacks were 2,265. And I just have not had time, and I hope that somebody will help me with the Baldwin County figures for that. Of course, they came working in turpentine stills, and this is wonderful old pictures of them harvesting the sap from the pine trees. One of them here, in fact, had a grandfather who worked at the pottery that's now Potter's Mill. So potteries were a huge industry. That's been some of our talks here at this series as well. Big industry. Now I'm going to start up north with some people that we don't have represented here tonight. Bromley is not really Eastern Shore, but Spanish Fort is. And so it's kind of, I feel like it's appropriate there. How do you do this? All right, this one lists Bromley right here on Bay Minette Creek. On Bay Minette Creek, right here on this road, which is now Bromley Road above Spanish Fort High School, is now paved, there was a huge 3-story mill on that river. And many people African Americans came to work in that mill after the war, especially. Today, 225, which is the old stagecoach road to Blakely, is really more listed as Bromley right along the road of 225 here. That's where you pass the sign. This map doesn't show it, but right here there's a little circular street called Magnolia. And the reason is it's Magnolia Church Road. And on that road was a Baptist church, Magnolia Baptist Church. And one of the people that was very active in that community was Rebecca Tompkins. And she and her husband built a one-room school with the community, built a one-room school there at the church using Rosenwald money. And that could be a whole program. We're not going to go into it too much, except to say there was a benefactor, Julius Rosenwald, who owned Sears. In early 1900s, he worked with Tuskegee University to build schools for blacks in rural areas. And there were 400 of them in Alabama. 14 of them were in Baldwin County. This one is still standing. 2 of the other schools we talk about will include that too. But this one has been saved. It's the Bicentennial Park in north of I-65 on 225. Also, we are focused because of the Eastern Shore being waterfront towns. And when you talk about communities, these communities that formed, a lot of them were just summer homes. And so a lot of people that came for the summer brought all of their household goods, and before the war they brought their slaves as well to their homes. And many of the homes, of course, there were also the resorts here. This is the Howard Hotel, which is where Belle Roseville Leaf Plantation was. It's Bayside Academy today. It's their main building in Bayside Academy. But they hired African Americans to work. This is also a big pottery town too. And the shipping industry had a lot of African Americans. Okay, I'm going to fly through this Point Clear Hotel, and the permanent settlements were settled around where those were. Daphne was especially one of those, because there were so many free blacks that were there as well, and it became known. Now, actually, as we talk a little bit now, I'm tempted just to let any of these people take a microphone as a picture comes up and tell us something. This is south of Bromley. We are just putting these maps together. Isn't that going to be a wonderful product when we get a map with these communities delineated? Arnett, it took me around a couple of days ago, and I still can't find them when I go back. But Ellisville right here is almost in Loxley. The Ellises, I don't have a representative of those family yet, but Do you think maybe they were descendants of slaves because those were such big plantation areas? Around Loxley was one of the biggest plantations that you'll hear a little bit more about. And I am going to ask Miss Merrill if you just stand up. I just met her, and she is a gelding, and she has ancestors in this settlement. All right, here's 64. This is 64. This is Belfast. This is 55 going up this way, and this is the Yellings. Actually, it goes up right here. The Yelling settlement, but it's really Yelding. And she's going to someday explain to me how that name got changed. Sometimes you see it Yelding.
I just want to say that Ellisville is probably originated from a man by the name of Thomas Jefferson Ellis, who married over 200 slaves.
Will you just say it again? Say it again.
Ellisville probably, I'm not for certain, but I believe that it came from Thomas Jefferson Ellis, who married over 200 slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation. Slaves were lining up to get married because when they were slaves, they weren't allowed. So, let me say something.
And tell us your name.
My name is Sheila Pompey Ratcliffe. I was born in Daphne, grew up in Fairhope. I'm also working with Baldwin County Historic Commission with Felicia Anderson, and in the process of documenting the historical settlers that were African American descent, Mulatto descent, French descent, Spanish, because we were all mixtures. We're finding that out, and we're going to tell that part. Ellisville, I actually have the deeds. I can't remember if it was President Roosevelt, the deed of the land to the Ellis family. The family still lives on the land. They're my cousins. A lot of these properties were actually settled by people of color, and I use the terminology color because they were very diverse. And that's how the name Ellisville came up. And we do have a representative who can share more information.
I think you could write this book for us.
And let me say, because it's on the board, the marriage, some of you, if you've been following, if you participated in the 200-year celebration that was held in Robbinsdale a few months ago, my aunt was recognized. She'll be 103. This time it was going out. She'll be 104, I'm sorry. She'll be 104 next Saturday. And her documentary was just filmed in Malvis. Malvis was never a plantation. You will hear that story very shortly when she tells it. But my family was already here before the Greeks ever came.
Thank you so much. The Arnetta, she's the first one that told me there was syrup salad. She said some Sally made syrup along here. You want to tell us anything a little bit about this? Who wants to tell us a little bit about this neighborhood in Park City and Jonesboro?
Actually, Sir Sally was a settlement, and our Surgeon General, Regina Benjamin's family, was in Sir Sally. And it was a mecca for when Father Vincent Warren came with him for his evangelization. He was able to evangelize a lot of people from Sir Sally, which is now Park City. And the story that I was told to remember, Mr. Lloyd McCrary had a store there. And he had a bread box.
There was fields.
There's still sugarcane growing right around there, isn't there?
It was a lot of sugarcane, and there were a lot of other items being grown up there also.
Did y'all recognize that's the malfunction junction right here? See what that is? I keep going the wrong thing, I'm sorry. Now, another.
What is the real name of Park Drive?
Well, Park City has been called Yancey Road.
Right.
You know that.
Yes, we
The surveyor, all right. Yeah, it later became Park Drive, but it was Yancey
I don't know
Road for
who did that
years.
to us.
Pardon?
I don't know who did that to us.
I don't like it.
There's a lot of old maps that even have Jonesboro written on it. And I wasn't real sure exactly how to outline this, so I don't know if you want to, what do we know as Jonesboro today?
Jonesboro was near, I would say, what I know it as to be near where maybe Jackson, on back to Jackson Street, and maybe across to, in Friendship, just a little bit on Jonesboro Road. And it was, yeah, it would start maybe near maybe Jackson's and teeter to Jackson Street, and then maybe across. And in Friendship, it's a street called Jonesboro. Yes, so I would say that was the area.
Jonesboro Road.
Yes.
Right down there.
Yes.
And while she mentioned this too, see, this is the Jackson Street community, that's County Road 13 now. The Friendship Road is right here, it's on the next one. This right here, Milton Jones Road, was called the Bottoms. Any reason why?
I don't know, but it was a Bible. And, I guess probably because it was low. And, my cousin Charlotte probably remember the club called the Bloody Bucket. And Miss Minnie Pearl that lived out there. But that's what I was told, you know, that was the area. And Miss Thomas, who lived in a log cabin on Main Street, they were there first in the Bible. And then they sold that, and I guess Miss Minnie Pearl, and then they moved to Main Street.
Okay, and then Friendship, it's Friendship Road right there off 64, and there is Friendship Road right there. See, it's right there. Most of the communities were around a church. These are terrible pictures, but this was, was it ever called Friendship Baptist Church? It's called, Friendship Church is called African Universal Church now.
African University.
What's always been,
That's
the Jonesboro, Daphne area, and now Old Town Daphne. You want to get where you could, I don't know, maybe y'all want to stand where you could see and tell. I thought maybe these might help, but if you just want to tell us. Now, Ella really, well, she stayed with a grandmother a lot in Daphne. Yolanda McConico grew up right where Judge Roy Beans was today. And Old Town Daphne, if you'll just tell us a little bit about the pictures and then tell us about growing up, okay?
Okay. Well, this.
Hold the microphone up to your mouth. Or you want to come stand here?
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you very much. So talk into that.
Yeah, that has changed, because we only had one little traffic light. But, this is the, Mason, it's been there a long time. And, the high school, Baldwin County Training School, was across the street, which is now J.W. Carroll Middle School. And we used the Mason building for the boys to do horticulture at Mason. That's where they worked. We called it, they didn't do nothing but play ride behind a pickup truck. Now, there was a lot of school teachers on Main Street. Mrs. Ruth Rome, house is still there. Missionary Baptist Church. We're celebrating about 140 years. 40 years. And this is the third building that they have fellowship in. It wasn't that elaborate in that they did that in 99, the free renovations. Down Little Bethlehem is where Macedonian Missionary Baptist Church Reverend Lett reused the cemetery there. We've got a lot of family there in the cemetery behind the church. Reverend Donald Parker is the shepherd of that church today. They still have services there. A little bit down, we have a grocery store, Triumph, and the community of Daphne, and some of my girls, Belfast, they would come and do their shopping, and the Triumph would give credit. They had a book, and like my grandmother would get her check from my grandfather, a veteran, widow's check, and they would pay their bill when they get their money. They gave them that. They gave them credit, but that was at one time it was our post office also. They ran the post office and the grocery store where Cut and Vinny is. And there was one traffic light in the whole city of Daphne. And there was one policeman, I don't know his whole name, but my grandmother would call him, I had his full name, Charles, you remember?
There were two Mr. Percy.
Percy, that's who it was.
Van Elster.
So behind that, the antique club was the jailhouse, and in the front of it was a service station. So just imagine that people were real good back then. Now look at Daphne Jail today. Okay.
I'm just going to end it 1 second before we go ahead. If you notice this marker, this land was deeded by Louis Stark, Louis Doley's son-in-law, and one of the original members was on the Clotilda, which has been in the news so much lately about them last ship to bring a carload of slaves, into the United States. And Lucy had a son named Russell. And are there any descendants of Russell dead here? You just tell everybody.
All day.
Way back.
Russell Dick, they own downtown there.
That's right.
Miss Bessie Dix Hayes, where Daphne City Hall is right now. She owned the property. And I was small, and I used to walk through Daphne, and Miss Bessie Dix would sweep, she had a yard broom. And she had a little white picket fence that was about waist high. Kept the yard very, very clean. The city of Daphne wanted to purchase her land. She would not sell it. They condemned the property. And she ended up, and at present time, Daphne City Hall sits on that property. And I remind them constantly, the city officials, this is where Miss Dix stayed. Bessie Dix. And Dix Russell had a restaurant across from Nancy's. Right there. But they own downtown there, that whole vicinity. And his son was the Iceman, Bug Mix. He sold ice. And I can remember that being small and this, but that was consistent of that.
Target, the black.
Yes, and across Target, I can't think of the lady's name, Charles. She had us back and forth all day until we got enough to go get us some snacks. But Daphne, I can say as a child, in Miss Marguerite Carlisle's, she had the drive to the hardware store across the street. And I worked for Daphne Senior Center, and she was one of my seniors. And she said, you know, I remember you when you were a little girl walking the streets of Daphne. And she said, I would look out the window and see you walking over here. But as for Daphne was the place to live, the place to be. As an African-American child, I never experienced any discrimination on that level. Respected by all, and I need to be respectful to whomever, to show respect. So it was a good time, and people.
But there was segregation. Tell us about the beaches. There were separate beaches for African.
Yes, okay, we had Edgewater Beach, which is now where Bayfront is, Daphne Bayfront Park. And then on the other side, Publix, it was Paradise Beach. And then near Village Point, it was Jones Beach. And across from where we live, we actually grew up thinking we owned the beach. It was Ragged Point. And we had access to that beach for years and years and years.
This is where she lived right here.
Yes, that's where I grew up, right there in there.
This is where Judges was. This is the Shrine of the Holy Cross. Maybe we'll get to.
Right, that's right.
Y'all want to stay 3 hours?
Let me say this too. From where she's talking about the beaches, Miss Crandall owned from Park City Road, which you saw earlier. She owned from Park City Road, which was on the other side of Main, when Main cuts across up there. She owned from there all the way to the road. Acres and acres, where Publix is a Publix up there, the grocery store.
Stand up and face everybody.
She owned every bit of it.
Mary, would you like to stand up and
That's what
face
to say, her
everybody?
name was Sarah Ann Crandall.
Sarah Ann Crandall.
She was my mother's first cousin. And where Mo's barbecue is right now, that was her house. Edgewater Beach was also called Cousin Sarah Ann's Beach.
Sarah
We didn't say Sarah Ann, we said Sarah Ann.
Oh, wonderful. I want to see what we can do here. Let me scoot a little bit on to Fairhope right now and let Ella talk a little bit about Fairhope. We're going to come back to Montrose and to the north, to the Shrine of Holy Cross Church, because that's going to tie a lot of stuff together here at the end. But Ella is going to tell us a little bit about the, she's going down to Houstonville and Wilson's Neck. I had never heard of Wilson's Neck.
Okay.
Talk into the microphone. People
All
can hear
right.
you.
I have a large voice, but anyway.
Well, stand back there.
Fairhope, where I grew up, there is, you see, Twin Beach AME Sign Church. Right there. And my family was about a quarter of a mile down south of the church. And it was called Wilson Neck because all the land and the people lived down from Cedar Street all the way around the curve, Twin Beach, where the cemetery is, Twin Beach Cemetery. And then you come back a little bit and go, that would be north of that little Y, would be, it's called Herd Road. All of that is considered Wilson Neck. And I want to talk a little bit about, we did a lot of walking. You know, no push buttons, we had to walk uptown, that's what they call Fairhope. And we had 5 to 10 stores that we could afford to go in and buy things. The drugstore She was